moribund assets. We'll also discuss the strides made in the power sector, funding the state's budget, and efforts to improve the ease of doing business in this state. I'm Sean Wakimalo, a broadcaster with the prestigious, highly decorated and leading television network, Channels Television. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues in the industry in this media chat, a very esteemed and distinguished media personalities, the famous Babajide Kolade Otitoju of the television continent at TVC. Thank you so much, Babajide, for being here.
Thank you.
And the very brave Rotus Odiri of the Arise News Network. It's good to have you, Rotus.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
And our dear Natli Uko of the very vibrant Afia Television, doing great job representing the region here and beyond. Thank you so much, Natli.
Thank you so much.
And the big voice of television, Ladi Akeredoluwale from Enugu Television. Ladi, it's good to have you.
Thank you very much.
Together, we shall be engaging Governor Mbah in a candid conversation to provide you, our viewers, with an insightful analysis and the governor explaining himself on what he has to offer the people of the state, at least telling us what he has done so far in the last 1 year under his leadership. Ladi.
Thank you very much, Sean, and let me use this opportunity to welcome our host and, of course, our guest at the same time, His Excellency, the 5th democratically elected governor of Enugu State, Dr. Peter Mbah. Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ladi, Natalie, Babajide, Seun, and Rotus. I also want to welcome you to Enugu, the coal city state. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I guess I should set the ball rolling, Your Excellency, and I think the topmost question is that anybody who has taken a look at your CV will see that before now, you were a highly successful businessman in the private sector, running your own things your own way. Why did you decide to leave that comfort zone and jump into what is popularly known as the muddy waters of politics, with all its twists and turns, and how has the experience been, having done so in the last 1 year?
Thank you very much, Ladi. That's a good question. So if you take a look, since the advent of this Fourth Republic, you would realize that we have in Enugu State had successive government under our party, PDP. And a lot of those governments have done great stuff. They've continued to build on the infrastructure. They ensured that salaries were paid, and basically made sure that things were going incrementally. So I took the view that that operating system that we've had in the last 24 years needed to be disrupted, and we needed to innovate, right? So if you look at the innovation X curve, in my view, I believe that that system has gotten to the peak of that X curve. So we needed to do things. So the demands of the time we are in require someone whose experience, both in the private and the public sector, would be able to deal with that, that innovation that we're talking about. So for example, if you look at the same operating system that I referred to, it has served us to a point where if we did nothing, or if we do not do some radical things, we may be consumed. So based on that appreciation of what the demands of our time require, and also fueled by my passion to serve, I had to step out of the comfort zone you've referred to ask the mandate of my people to serve them. And which was why, if you look at when we set out to seek the mandate of our people, we had some catchphrases that sort of resonated with the people. We talked about disruptive innovation. We talked about tomorrow is here. And we've since been able to try and show that the incremental growth model or the marginal growth model we've had in the past, it's no longer able to sustain us as a people and even the economy. So the tomorrow is here we refer to talks about the immediacy. It speaks to the immediacy of the things we have to do if we must attend to the future of the people of Enugu State.
Interesting. I think that was a good way to start, giving an overview of why you had to leave all that very comfortable arena and come into politics. But I think we should begin in earnest in the security sector. That is a major. The Constitution made it clear that the role and the primary responsibility of government is to secure the lives of Nigerians. So in that line, I'll allow Babajide to begin.
My question is, can you say, because from the beginning you made it clear that you do not want to hear about the sit-at-home syndrome that many people see as a big disincentive to business. Can you say with finality that you have achieved your aim of defeating the sit-at-home syndrome? Can we say that across the length and breadth of your state, including the hinterland, that the sit-at-home syndrome is now a thing of the past?
Thank you. So one thing that was very clear from when we were going out to campaign was the absolute clarity of vision where we wanted to take our people to. And recall I had said something about disruptive innovation, which meant that the model, the trend we did in terms of our growth rates over the years, we felt that that was not sustainable and that was not going to take us to the promised land. So we said something to our people. We said we're going to, the vision we have is to grow the economy from the current level of $4.4 billion to $30 billion. So that's not marginal, that's exponential, right? So we also said that we're going to achieve a 0% rate in our poverty headcount index. That is coming from a 58% poverty rate to 0. So those would require you to do things differently. And we recognize very early that the growth we're talking about won't come from just public sector. It has to happen through private sector investment. And of course, one of the major things that poses a huge threat to the spirit of enterprise is criminality, right? It also, as you know, drains the life of a city. So we recognize and realize that if we must go beyond posturing, if we must just go beyond the catch phrases and deal with the substance, we had to address the insecurity challenges, which was why within 72 hours of my swearing in, we made some consequential pronouncements. We made it clear that the so-called illegal sit-at-home order, which essentially has largely held our people, is almost like a stranglehold to our people. We felt that there's no way we could go out there to attract businesses or investors to Enugu State if we still have a situation where some criminals out there would sit somewhere and tell us the days in the week that we must go to work and the days we must sit at home. We just felt that that was unacceptable and was inexcusable. So we had to confront that frontally. And essentially what we did was to mobilize the security forces. There were a couple of radical things we had to do. Introducing the distress response squad. Making sure that we empower and enhance the capacity of our security agencies. And above all, we were also, because we have zero tolerance for crime, we also had to embark on introducing a technology platform that allows us to have a line of sight to whatever is going on in the state, so that even where you still have some breaches, we have the capacity to be able to solve it. And that's the real thing we believe that is important in security management, the ability to be able to identify, track, resolve crime promptly. And that's the sort of capacity we've built right now in the state.
No, I asked a definitive question about the sit-at-home syndrome. Have you successfully defeated that?
Well, I think we have resigned sit-at-home to one of those bad memories, things that existed that we do not want to even think about again. We no longer have the sit-at-home. I'm sure you would also bear a testimony to that. This is today, as you know, is a Monday. It's a working day for everybody in Enugu. Yes. People are going about their business, working. So it is not something we want to remember, because it's devastating. It's done a lot of destruction to our psyche and even to our economy. So that's something we've put behind us.
And perhaps just to follow up on what Babajide asked about the sit-at-home. Sit-at-home is not only peculiar to Enugu State, it's a regional problem. And when we wonder, what did you do? And those who will be asking the question, maybe it's cosmetic, maybe it's just momentary or temporary. Because there are those who also will say this wasn't about guns and bullets. It could be mostly political and some form of carrot. Can you give us an insight on what you did, if you think that it has been nipped in the bud?
I think you did say something, that the primary responsibility of any government is the security and welfare of the people. And I think that that same sentiment is shared by a number of my other colleagues who are also in the region. So, it will be difficult to explain your reason for existence if you cannot, at the minimum, provide security for your people, right? So we know that this is above politics. We needed to rise beyond party or even tribal sentiments to address what is critical and what is a primary responsibility. And I think that's what I could say that also happened in the region, where we had to come together as a people and tell ourselves the hard truth, that look, if we must really move or even go a step further and achieve what we have promised our people, there is no way we can just pay lip service to insecurity. So we collaborate a lot, we share intel, and that is essentially where you need to go. We also had gone as far as even having a common command and control center where intel is shared and actions are promptly taken. And in some instances, there is also a joint operation. If we have to now narrow in on these criminals, because we know that, okay, there's nothing separating Enugu from Anambra, and that these guys can easily step out of Enugu and go into another state to hibernate, only to come back and hit. So we felt the need to collaborate and work in partnership to resolve this.
Because I will imagine that the agitation was what some people will say that has led to that. that phenomenon of sit-at-home, which became so popular and crippled the economy. And I hope that maybe our viewers can get more insight into whether this was largely criminality or political. But if you are able to answer that, also, there are pockets of killings that we have heard in Uzowani, LGA, in Nimbo and Oba. And what are you doing to really deal decisively with some of these violent activities?
I think if you have also followed up events, you would recognize that there is no genuine agitator who believes in sit-at-home. That doesn't exist. It is not, I mean, think about it. Imagine depriving your kids, your children, the opportunity to sit for a national exam, denying them the thousands of learning hours that they would have in school. Imagine making it impossible for your people to develop infrastructure, because the contractors also would be impacted, right? For the days that they don't have to work, so they have to build all that in. So I don't think there is any person who is interested in his people or who wish his people well that would advocate for a sit-at-home, because that just destroys, it affects our work ethics, it impacts on our children, it affects our economy. So what we're dealing with, again, I don't think you would ever have a society where you're going to have zero crime, right? So what is important is that the state develops the capability to be able to identify, track, capture, and ensure that justice is done to whoever commits crime. And that's essentially, so we, as I said, we have zero tolerance for crime, and the people know it. So if you commit a crime here, you take steps to go kill somebody, we would do everything. We would do everything necessary to ensure. You may have followed the news recently where I had to make some pronouncement offering bounty to whoever could come up with an information leading to a particular breach of security that we had. And that's the position we take here. We frown at crime, so we have no tolerance for it.
Atlee.
All right, still in line with your question concerning the pockets of killings in Isuzu and Uzowani, we've had people chased away from their farmlands, and some people have linked this insecurity to land, possibly thinking that these suspected headers want to assume ownership of these lands. So I'd like to know what your government is doing in the area of land management in the state, and those killings, the specific answer to those killings going on in those local governments.
So for the challenges, we know that there are some hot, or if you will, dark spots. And what we have done in the states, it's even a lot more fundamental to addressing these challenges. So if you look at the partnership we've just recently entered into with the Navy, we're now siting a Nigerian naval base in Uzowani, right? That construction is ongoing now. We have the first deployment of the Navy that is around there now. This is essentially to ensure that that tension is doused. Also in Isuzu, we've also had the army deployed there, so we're looking at setting up an army barracks there. We have the first set of deployment already there in Isuzu. So these were tension that existed, but we've been able to douse those tension, and we've been able to get our people back to their farmland, okay? And ultimately, we believe that we would still have, and we're working on that, we need to be able to get our people to understand that, you know, you have to deal with, there's just no way you can have the people whose life depend largely on subsistence farming. There's just no way you can deprive them from their farming, and you, header, continue to do your business without those tensions. So we are if you followed up what we've done recently, is to come up with a system where both parties can coexist and they both do their businesses without one affecting the other, and that's the system we're trying to achieve ultimately.
Your Excellency, let me at that point also then ask the question about, because you talked about both parties doing their businesses, and I know that there's been quite a bit of controversy about ranching.
Yeah.
Some of those who own the land say that the whole brouhaha is about, as Sean pointed out, taking over the land. But very recently, the State House of Assembly put in place a ranching bill, which I assume at some point will be sent to you for signature. And then on the other hand, you have the communities, some of them complaining that they were not carried along in areas to be designated as ranching. Now, can you clear the air with what the government's plan is with regards to this ranching, and how those who own the land and the herders stand to benefit, so that the controversy doesn't continue?
I'm glad you pointed that issue out. We just recently had the State House of Assembly pass the bill of ranch management. And so what that is, and it's very important, we've had to engage our people. We've had series of town hall meetings, engage the traditional rulers to get them to understand the import of the ranching bill. So if you're going to have the herders and the farmers cohabit, because you cannot trample, one cannot trample on the other's right? And where your right ends is largely where the other's right begins. So what we've done to resolve that is to designate areas where you're going to do ranching, essentially an enclosed area where you can't have your cattle out of. And this ranching is largely going to be a marketplace, okay? It is beyond just where you have pastures for cattle to feed. It is also where we're going to build a modern abattoir, we're going to have a feed mill, we're going to have a proper market, okay? And it is not exclusive to any one set of people. Our people are also free. This is a trade, it's a business, which does not exclude anybody. So it's not designed to only be for, say, the Fulanis or indeed one tribe. Our people are traders. And what does it entail? Buying and selling cattle. We are very good business people. So we're trying to also create an opportunity where everybody can play. We're talking about a market size of over 50 billion naira here. And there's no reason why our people can't play in that market. We consume a lot of cattle here. So we're going to do a modern ranch where we're going to have all the features of any modern ranch anywhere in the world. So you're going to have the abattoir, you're going to have a veterinary clinic, you're going to have the feed mill and all that. So, and that's essentially what that bill speaks to.
We're going to be wrapping up quickly on security so that we can move on to Brutus.
Yeah, so I think, Your Excellency, the economic backdrop is always a good context within which to talk about security and so on. When you talk about raising GDP from 4 billion to 30 billion, I'd like to put that against the context of in Nigeria as a whole. In the same way Sheon asked you about the regional challenges with Sit at Home, with what you're trying to do. So, my question is basically how much of these security issues are economic, right? Inflation as of April, year on year in Enugu is 29.93%, right? It's below the national average at 33.69, but it's practically 30%. Food inflation in Nigeria is about 40%. In Enugu is 41.4, which is higher than the nation's average. I know Kwara, Kogi states, those are 48, 44. There are states that are much higher. But when you put the security situation within the context of cost of living and the incentive to want to gravitate towards crime, how much of that is taking up your attention to where you want to, reduce the incentive of going towards crime by improving the economic metrics of the state?
So we realized that we had to disrupt on several fronts in order for us to at least be able to impact on some of the indicators you've reeled out. So what is happening is the growth. I mean, talking about a growth of 4.4 billion to 30 billion is a seven-fold growth in a horizon of 7 years. If you do the calculus, that's about 27% compounded annual growth rate. That's massive, and the weight is not lost on us. We're indeed mindful, and we had also done our numbers, so we didn't just pluck the 30 billion from the blue. We understood clearly what it would require to get, and in fact, if you look at some of the things we're doing across all the other sectors, it's largely connecting the dots, to be able to take us to that growth level. So the reason we had paid so much attention to insecurity was because it has a major impact. Now, a lot of the growth we've talked about is going to come from private sector investment. And Enugu has a great brand equity. Enugu is not just a city of yesterday. We're talking about a city of over 100 years old that has played a lot of roles in the economy of this country and become the administrative headquarters of a lot of governments, right from when we were the southern. It was the administrative headquarters of the southern provinces, the eastern Nigeria, the east central Nigeria, Anambra. So it's still in this. So Enugu, it's a state that is consequential. And largely what we believe is that with the steps we're taking, we want to bring her back to that preeminent role. So deal with insecurity, attract businesses to come, but those growth, even though they may be driven by private sector, it has to be enabled by government. So what that means is that all the indicators, for the ease of doing business, and including the sub-indicators, building the infrastructure, making sure the environment is secure, and also basically making sure that you have rule of laws, the enforcement of contracts, the procurement of your permits and setting up your businesses, that all that is easy for you to do when you come to Enugu. Now, our hope, if you talk about food security, we see agriculture beyond food. We see a lot of growth coming from that sector, which is why the first thing we did when we came in was to say, look, we're not just dealing with agriculture as a ministry. We immediately changed the ministry from just being agriculture to agriculture and agro-industrialization, because we're also interested in value add. So we're going to scale up production. We're already doing that by enhancing the capacity of our local farmers, but also making the environment convenient for private sector, for the large commercial farmers to come in and invest. So that's essentially where this growth we're talking about would come from.
Sure. I wonder whether we should just ask His Excellency this question. I know it's an emotive issue in our country. State police, where do you stand?
Again, I think it's a function of nomenclature. People call it all sorts. But the truth is that, do we need a unified or a centralized police? I think that's the question we should be asking ourselves. In my opinion, I think a centralized security system is the best. It is what is practiced in other climes, and it's been so effective. I mean, go to the United States. If you go to a county, if you're a stranger there, perhaps the first person that would confront you is the county cop there to ask who you are. So they get so close, they know who you are, they know you. So I think the issue of talking about state police, I think it's a no-brainer. We should really be thinking of a decentralized police system. We can decide what nomenclature to ascribe to it, whether we want to call it state police. But we do need to have a decentralized security system.
I want us to wrap up quickly on security and move on to water. But as a rider to what Babajide asked, and we've seen some very direct and deliberate action in the direction of what you have. You move quickly on banning and ending sit at home. You rolled out a pilot scheme on the distress response squad. You also set up a command and control center for effective surveillance of the state, bringing technology. You also push for the establishment of a naval base in the coastal area of Oguruguru in Uzo, Wani, LGA. You also went ahead to push for the siting of army barracks in Isuuzo in the northern border of Enugu State. And you have also set up the Enugu State Security Trust Fund, which was actually captured in the laws of 2020, but wasn't really activated. Yeah. How far do you want to go in ensuring that, well, you don't want to call it state police, but the decentralized police system? Yeah. How far do you want to go with it? Because we've seen some state government literally replicating their own state police structure, their own security apparatus, and some other empowering traditional rulers within their state and local government and local council to also have their own sector of some kind of policing. How far do you want to go in ensuring that the police system is decentralized?
So we've not been left out even in those community settings of policing. In Enugu State, we have the neighborhood watch, we have the forest guards. Okay, so we have also, as you may have also followed recently, I was in Austria, in Vienna, where we signed a memorandum of understanding with the Austrian government to set up a K9 unit here in Enugu. And so we're working on that essentially to, all this is all designed to deal with the security. So how far are we willing to go? So all these institutions we have here, whether it's the neighborhood watch, which is quite structured, or the forest guard, the real thing that is required in order to get these various bodies to be efficient is the extent of capacity and empowerment you give them. And that is the discussion I'd like us to have, to say, look, should we really empower these local institutions that we already have the framework, and to ensure that they can bite? So it's not just backing, but that you've allowed them to be able to deal with these challenges without really waiting for orders or instructions to come from Abuja. That's the key question we really need to.
So in some way you feel a bit handicapped, because some governors have complained that they are just, they are not really, they are not chief security officer like they call them, yes, because they are really handicapped. Do you feel like that sometimes when you need a swift action on insecurity in Enugu State?
So we've had a very good working relationship with perhaps the law enforcement agencies here, and that's why we are we're already thinking that even in terms of the cost outlay of managing, the decentralized security system, we've already started absorbing a lot of those costs, because we step in instead of just being on the fringes or just wait for something. We get interested in working with the central system, the central police, to understand how we can, help to also empower or enhance their capability to fight crime, because ultimately that is what we have taken an oath to preserve, the security and welfare of our people. So it's not something we would be passive about or to sit back and feel helpless about. I mean, it means so much to us, and in fact, a lot of, so just beyond that primary responsibility, it would even be almost impossible for us to accomplish the campaign promises we've made to our people if we don't address this. So
let's take a final one. Sorry, hold on. Let's take a final one with. Okay.
Let me link this. Even the projects that you have in mind are impacted by security. And I know that Shehu mentioned the issue of water. It was easily the most eye-catching promise you made during the campaign, which is, we'll provide Enugu with water within 180 days. And people said, no, it's impossible. You can't do it. Now you did. But then, a lot of those infrastructure have been vandalized by some of the criminal elements within that you referred to earlier on in the interview. And I wonder, the nexus between security, which Rochus talked about, economy, Shehu mentioned the fact about state police and so on, and then the battle you are having with control here, essentially with forces that don't report to you, but who are supposed to manage this crisis. I'm wondering how you are dealing with that nexus, because that is something that is impacting directly on your ability, seemingly, to fulfill the promise you have made to the people, and who don't want to hear, oh, well, actually, this is the problem here, and, you know, I'm handicapped and so on. How are you dealing with that?
Again, talking about infrastructure and the challenges we have with vandalism, stealing, and the rest of it. Yet we gave ourselves a time frame of 180 days to be able to deal with the water challenges too, which again is so this is a problem that we've had to endure over the decades. We didn't just say 180 days because we felt that it was a low-hanging fruit that can easily be notched. We did say that because looking at the wish list of our people, we knew where water ranked on that wish list, and we were in a hurry to make sure that it got ticked off from that wish list. So we of course had to again deploy the disruptive innovation despite all the inherent challenges. So with water, what you would notice is that we've accomplished quite a lot. In fact, for context, let's imagine before we came, and one of my most depressing moments during the campaign was, sight of seeing children carrying buckets and cans in a queue, buying water from tankers. Okay, so we just didn't think that was acceptable, in society like ours. So we had to move, of course, the production volume. We were talking about a production volume that was just paltry 2 million liters per day. We had to move that from that paltry number of 2 million to 120 million liters. So in terms of water supply, we have more than enough water to supply to the people of Enugu. And however, we're still having to deal with the challenges you just mentioned, where we're trying to make sure it gets to the last mile, making sure that every home turns on their tap and they have water running. And that's where the challenge is, because beyond just dealing with the fact that they vandalize these pipes as you're installing them and they steal them, you're also dealing with replacing old asbestos pipe that are now, they are brittle and corroded, so they cannot stand the water pressure. So we've now had to, tear open the ground to replace those old asbestos pipe, and also make sure that even where we have buildings affecting the reticulation line, we're not dealing with that, we're redirecting them. Because the option we have is to say we'll start pulling down houses. But again, our job is to make life easy for our people. So where we can avoid doing so, we, by all means, will redirect the pipe and make sure. So, and that's what we're dealing with now. And we're, of course, hoping that we're going to continue to work with the security agencies to ensure that they protect these public utilities and these public assets.
All right. Let's exit security now. Rotus has one question.
Just a follow-up. I guess your feedback channels with the people. I guess what are you hearing? Because it's the people of Enugu that will tell your story. Just really quickly, Rise News were in Kigali 9 days ago for the Africa CEO Forum, and you can walk around there 2-3 a.m. in the morning and feel safe. And the indigents, I vacationed there in late 2022 before even going there for work, and so the indigents will tell you that Kigali is a safe city. You've got police stations. What kind of feedback are you getting over the past year from the people on the changes that you've made to security and so on?
Oh no, so don't forget where we're coming from, and I'm sure you must have also, you must have been, you must have heard this across different channels. We were dealing with a situation where our police stations were constantly attacked. It was almost on a weekly basis. Our checkpoints were attacked, our policemen were killed, our armed forces were killed, and their arms carted away. So that was where we're coming from. And, so it's very easy for us to forget, and of course I don't begrudge anyone who may not be able to remember where we're actually coming from as a people. The truth is that we've made tremendous progress in the area of security. We believe that whatever minor breaches we have, we're able to contain them and we're addressed. And so the feedback has been great, not particularly from the people of the state, because again, one of the things we did very earlier on, few hours after my swearing in, you recall that I immediately came and signed an executive order 1, which is the Citizens Charter. That Citizen Charter mandates me to engage the citizens of the state, to give my scorecard every 3 months. So we have a town hall meeting where we basically tell the people of the state what we have done, how much more of their money we've received, what we have used the money for, and all that. So the feedback has been great.
All right, let's exit. Interestingly, Ladi drove you through security to water route. But water is very interesting. I mean, it's perhaps not a conversation that you will have in governance in Nigeria, because it never gets that kind of attention. A lot of, if you look at the deficit that Nigeria, most states of the Confederation, people have in water is very, very abysmal. And when we wonder what government is doing, for 2 decades, the people of Enugu State they've suffered over the issue of water. But I'll allow Natalie to hit us with questions on the issue of water.
All right, so I'd like to take it up from where you left. The question I've always had at the back of my mind is, why was it so difficult for previous administrations to actually secure water in Enugu State? You were able to at least secure the generation and certain level of distribution in 180 days. What was so difficult to achieve, Your Excellency? You can clear us on that.
Well, I guess the key thing, what we did was, first of all, we had to dimension the problems. We had to have also, so if you were to craft a strategy, you need to be able to do some trend analysis. You have to have baseline data and understand the way things have evolved over the years. And so we did all that. So it was clear to us where the pressure points were, where what we needed to address. We looked at the upstream, the midstream, and of course the downstream. So we identified all that. So when we committed to 180 days time frame, we we also knew what the long lead items were. We knew those things that if we didn't begin to front load, it was going to impact that time frame. So we set immediately forth at dawn. We had to start pre-ordering. We had to start, so it's a fast track model. So it's almost like if you're going to think about innovation, you could think about innovation as doing something routinely, but just becoming better at it, growing marginally. Or you could think of innovation as doing something radical or disruptively. Okay, so just changing things from the way they had been done before. And that was the model we adopted. We felt that we couldn't do an incremental model. So if we were going to do an incremental model, it would be growing from 2 million liters to maybe 5 million. We needed the total daily consumption for Enugu Metropolis was 80 million liters daily. So we needed to at least grow to that point and even build buffer, which was what we did. So it was basically, as I said, dimensioning the problem, thinking through it, knowing how to fast track, and also, most importantly, assembling the right team, making sure you have the right people who would execute. Because with the best idea, with the clarity of thoughts and with the right direction, if you don't have the team that will lead that process, you're still going to be stuck.
So, I mean, maybe a follow-up.
Yes.
One of the problems that you have mentioned, you said about 200 houses have been built on water lines in Enugu State, and you feared the issue of demolition. Well, how are you going to resolve that? If buildings are presently on the waterways, on the water lines, how do you resolve that? Or what are your plans in resolving that?
So, except it's absolutely necessary that we couldn't rechannel or redirect the channel, then we have to basically bring that building down. But so far what we have done is costing us more, and in some cases we've had to ask those who violated the building rules and codes to absorb that cost, so that, of course, because the alternative would be to pull down those houses, which is something we would be very reluctant to do. So we have continued to redirect and to ensure that the water gets to the last mile. So we're doing aggressive reticulation as we talk now. The idea is to deal with the tertiary parts, because we've got water up to the secondary line. We've dealt with the primary line, which is from the production point to the reservoir. We've also dealt with the secondary line from the reservoir to the headers. Okay, now dealing with the tertiary line from the headers to the households, different households, it's where we're now having challenges, because again, as I said, having to deal with all these obstructions. But we're determined, and we're not unwavering at all.
So, I like how you've spoken about water almost like electricity or oil and gas. When you talk about generation, the last mile, and you just talked about the tertiary lines to homes. And I know we'll get to electricity down the line, Enugu being the first state that has been given regulatory oversight over power. Ekiti and others followed, but you were first. It costs money to treat water. It costs money to distribute it. We've been showing, there are videos showing of you touring sites and the amount of infrastructure. What about the billing of water? I want to get your thoughts on, if you think about your normal utility bills that a household gets, power, electricity, water is one of them, right? Yeah. Is the state, are you going to shoulder that financial burden? Are you going to track how much water is being used? And what's your vision for how it's going to be billed? Because, as I said, it has to be treated. It's got, there's a cost there. And you just talked about it. So how down the line, how do you see that working out?
Well, that's a great question. The truth is that we're going to ensure that we continue to produce water, and we continue to produce more than enough that our people require. But I agree with you 100% water is a bankable sector. It's not something you shouldn't be able to sustain, right? And that's essentially our plan in the downstream. We expect to outsource that. We expect to bring in private sector to manage that. But again, because we know if we had to leave the burden of production on the private sector, the cost may be prohibitive. So which was why we intervened in the production side of things and of course in the midstream. We know that once we've stabilized this tertiary line distribution and we've gotten significant part of our city covered, we will bring in, because we don't want them, because of their investment outlay, to impose unbearable bills on our people. So we would eventually outsource the downstream, and to make it sustainable for us, that's the way to go. So the management of the downstream will be
quickly, just my fear when Rotus was asking the question is that the people at the bottom of the ladder usually get the brunt. Rural water supply. I mean, the people in the city, in most part of the city, the metropolises, they will get by somehow. But what incentive are you giving to the rural people to get access? They've suffered almost 50 years of this perennial water problem in Enugu State. Quickly, so that we can take Natalie before we go on break.
In fact, for the rural, we have modular systems. We are not actually addressing the rural water system the way we've addressed the urban water system. What we're doing, which is under our, we have an agency that is responsible for rural water supply and sanitation. So we are essentially building modular water supply system for the rural community, one that is sustainable, and as you said, that doesn't impose a huge cost on them. So that's is not going to apply to most rural areas. Yes.
Natalie, you signed out to break with your question.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So in the area of acceptance is a major challenge that sometimes is overlooked. Before we start talking about security, I was going to talk about the acceptance of the modern cattle ranches. We've seen people protest, so many people express some kind of displeasure because they are, for lack of better words, frightened by some of these Fulani herders. So when it comes to the water infrastructure, what is the government doing to let the people of Enugu know that they have to accept this water infrastructure as theirs, that they have to also be on the lookout for people who may be trying to vandalize some of this water infrastructure? And also, has the government made any progress in finding out who exactly is behind some of this vandalism that we're seeing? An area of acceptance, what measures are being taken?
So the people are not really interested in telling them about their problems, okay, or what has been responsible for their living conditions over the years. It is your responsibility, and I see that as my responsibility as someone who has been elected to serve the people, to communicate. So we have a responsibility. Even if they haven't accepted, it means we haven't communicated well. So we still need we have some work to do on our part to continue to engage. It's just like the ranch, management thing you've talked about. We also recognize that we still need more communication. We need to get the buy-in of the people. After all, democracy is a collective work. You can't go it alone. You have to carry the people along. And that's what we're doing. We're going to continue to do that to a point where people take ownership, understand how going to vandalize or burst or break the pipes affects you and indeed affect some other person. Again, we also believe that there are some entrenched interests. We've tried to explain to them, we've held series of meetings with them. The entrenched interests, those that have benefited from the status quo. It's our job to ensure that we get them to understand that you could still deploy your assets into other business models. It's just rejigging your business model. If you were using your tanker to provide water to homes, there is also, Enugu is a beehive of construction. So you can as well begin to use the same tanker to provide water for construction companies. So there are 101 other things. You can reconstruct it to go to the farmland, and so there It's just trying to get their buy-in, and we're working on all.
Well, that's a good time for us to take a break, a water break indeed, since we've been talking about water. So everyone, we will be right back. But one thing is very interesting. For a government that did almost 30% of its budget directed into one sector, education. He says he wants to build smart schools. What does it mean? Ambitious indeed, isn't it? We'll be right back after this break, everyone, and talk our conversation in this media chat with Governor Mbah of Enugu State. Be right back, everyone.
From the campaigns, the governor of Enugu State, Dr. Peter Mbah, never left anyone in doubt that he came prepared for the job. His vision is to grow the state's economy within the next 4 to 8 years from $4.4 billion to $30 billion, ensure a 0% in poverty headcount index, and position the state as a premier destination for business, investment, tourism, and for living. Recognizing security and welfare of the people as the primary purpose of government, the Dr. Peter Mbah administration, working in concert with the security agencies, waged a tenacious war against insecurity, including the illegal Monday sit-at-home and its associated violent crimes.
From Monday, June 5, 2023, there will be no observance of any sit-at-home in all the nooks and crannies of Enugu State.
The governor personally went around the state, mobilizing in Enugu against the illegal order. Today, even the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu, attests to the restoration of security and order in the state.
Before the coming of this administration, unfortunately, but that was what was going on, police stations were being attacked. Law enforcement people were being attacked. People were giving orders. They will be sitting outside selfishly. Those who are not even in Nigeria will sit somewhere in the comfort of the countries where they are living and giving instructions that people should not go to work. We want to thank the governor of Enugu State. He's done a wonderful job, and also tell people of this state to support him. He is doing a good job.
The state, under Governor Mbah, released a fleet of security vehicles to launch the pilot scheme of the District Response Squad, which full complements will ultimately comprise over 100 high-tech patrol vehicles with security surveillance cameras capable of facial and number plate recognition. The administration has completed a purpose-built high-tech command and control center while equally deploying high-tech surveillance facilities across Enugu, which are linked to the command and control center. To secure the coastal areas of the state and boost security in the state generally, the Governor Mbah administration is partnering with the Nigerian Navy to set up naval base at Ogrugu, Uzuwani local government area, and also with the Nigerian Army to set up barracks at Isuzu local government area in the northern border of the state. Government's seriousness in overhauling and repositioning the education sector and its infrastructure is underscored by the allocation of 33% of the entire budget to the sector, the highest anywhere in Africa. The government is currently constructing smart schools in the 260 wards in the state, while the pilot project is already up and running. This is designed to provide world-class education for children, including those with special needs, starting from age 3 through creche, nursery, primary, and junior secondary education. Each smart school has a clinic, ICT center, e-library, science laboratory for both primary and junior secondary schools, tech laboratory, center for robotics, studio, and interactive boards. Before now, lack of safe and clean water made Enugu unconducive for living and businesses, as attempts by successive governments to address the challenge failed. Mbah had therefore promised to restore water to Enugu metropolis in 180 days. Unrealistic as it sounded during the campaign, today, Mbah has lived up to the promise through sheer determination and massive investments in water infrastructure. On November 25, 2023, exactly the 180th day from his inauguration, Dr. Peter Mbah commissioned the ultra-modern 9th Mile 247 water scheme, which has, together with other overhauled and reinvigorated water schemes, raised water production capacity from the hitherto occasional 2 million litres to 120 million litres daily. This is way higher than the about 70-litre daily water needs of Enugu City. Coal City is now enjoying pipe-borne water, while massive reticulation, fixing and expansion works are ongoing. In October, Governor Peter Mbah flagged off the construction and reconstruction of 71 urban roads and construction of 10 strategic interlocal government and interstate roads to open up the rural areas to create access to the proposed special agro-processing zones, industrial parks and vast farmlands. The urban roads are wearing a new look to the joy of the long-forgotten parts of Enugu City, with these groundworks and achievements already recorded in less than 1 year in office, in addition to the extensive reforms of institutions and processes, from lands to revenue collection and public procurement. There is no doubt that Ndi Enugu are in for good times with sustainable development under the able leadership of the entrepreneur-turned-politician, Dr. Peter Mbah. Indeed, for Ndi Enugu, tomorrow is here.
Chinua Lumogu Achebe was born November 16, 1930 in Ogidi, Nigeria. He went to Government College in Umuahia, Nigeria. In 1948, Achebe won a scholarship to the University of Ibadan to study medicine, but after a year, he changed his major to writing.
Everyone for staying with us. This is a special media chat with the governor of Enugu State, Dr. Peter Mbah, and we've been talking about security. Took us a long time to talk about. It's very important and very germane to governance in this country, and we're back now we've talked about water, then we're now moving to education. But this is one man who says that he's going to spend a huge amount of money and resources in fixing the education sector. In fact, he talked about Smart Schools Initiative. And so we're back to the conversation with Governor Peter Mbah. Thank you so much indeed for this time. Let's begin the conversation around the Smart Schools. And perhaps, Natalie, you have a question, but I think the best way to start is 33% of the state's budget was allotted to education. What made you think that education? Because I've heard a lot of very brilliant people who led in WAEC and all whatever you jammed from Enugu State. But there must be something at the back of your mind that you thought was important to dwell on education and exactly smart schools. Why?
Sean, thank you very much for that question. So you already know that we actually do not have any other option. The lay of the land in the world of knowledge is shifting rapidly, and it's actually rendering our young people's knowledge, what supposedly we call their knowledge today, obsolete. Okay? So what that simply means is that if we did nothing, right, it means that our children would be completely left behind while the rest of the world continues to make giant strides across all sectors of mankind. So this became largely responsible for the resolve we made in the education sector. We recognize that whereas you could talk about a country being wealthy by virtue of its resources in terms of material and minerals and all that, we think that the true wealth lies in the human resources of any nation. And that's why we had no apologies at all. If it was possible to spend everything we had, we would dedicate it to education. We recognize also that the world is really not talking about a child of school age who is not in school. The world has since moved away from that, because don't forget, under the Millennium Development Goals, that was when the idea of no child of school age should be out of school. That was the goal the world set then. By 2015, they were done. A number of countries had moved on. So if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, you see it speaks to there shouldn't be any child who should not have access to quality early child learning. Okay? So it's no longer emphasis on a child of school age not in school. It is about the quality of access of learning that child has. And that's essentially what we felt should be our target in Enugu State, where we take a deliberate step to ensure that we guarantee quality access to early child learning. So whereas the UNESCO recommended budget, you know, if you talk about your global budget to education, it should be anywhere between 15 and 20%, right? In Enugu, we felt that we're way behind. We need to do a whole lot more than that. Maybe prescribing that for even people who have laid their foundation. We felt that we needed to leapfrog, and we cannot afford, based on where we are, to catch up. That strategy would never have been able to work for us. So we felt that we needed to leapfrog. And then that was why we took the radical step in education, where we are doing today 260 smart green schools across all the electoral wards. And the idea is that every child of Enugu State, every child living in Enugu State at age 3, irrespective of where they are, the rural area, urban area, must have access to go through that path of learning. So what the smart green school features, first of all, it has classes that begins at nursery. So you have the nursery, you have the pre-primary 1, the pre-primary 2. So again, we pick the index child at age 3 and put them through that pipeline of learning that allows us, first of all, to ensure that they are imbued with the right civic habits. We train them, make them understand that you can't just litter. If you go to the bathroom, you have to clean after use. Those little things we take for granted, we start getting them to learn those things. We imbue them with a skill set that they require for the workplace of tomorrow. We get them to go through that experiential learning. So we're not just teaching them how to memorize things. We're getting them to apply those things they are learning, to practicalize them, to feel it, to touch it. So that experience starts at age 3. So if you look at, and so this smart school features that age 3 entrance all the way to GS3. So that is 12 years of free mandatory education. which is beyond the 9 years.
What's the consequence of not, if it's mandatory, there must be a consequence of not
going.
Of not
and in fact, I can tell you that you may not even apply those consequences, because the queue now is much, because what the parents, we also offer free meal. So there's a free, one balanced diet meal for, these children. So we have about 300,000 children in this age bracket that we're dealing with. So we must ensure that they are provided one free meal every day. But beyond, it's also beyond just getting that index child at age 3. What it also does, even in the medical side of things, is that it also allows us to profile, to do the health profile of that child, to look at whether that child is growing at the right age, at the right rate. We also look at whether the child is wasting, whether the weight of the child is proper, and to ensure that, so we get all data that allows us to probe into whether the child had received all the prophylaxis, the vaccinations that they need to, because we're dealing with rural women, people who may not even appreciate the importance of making sure that these kids take their vaccines at the relevant age. So it's quite exhaustive, but interesting. What you must also note is once they get to primary 1, they set into that journey of their elementary school. We now get them to be exposed to things like robotics, artificial intelligence, CGI. So every smart school would feature a CGI studio where you talk about the computer-generated images, the virtual reality, the augmented reality. So you have a lab, 2 science labs, you have an ICT library, so it's profound.
I'm seeing some of these things, but
yes.
the penetration of internet.
Yes. So it's
a problem.
Every smart school has an internet. We have also
even in the rural areas.
Even in the rural area. In fact, we're building right now. Today, we have 135 sites going on where these smart schools are being built. The objective is to do 260, of course. And the idea is to absorb all the other mushroom schools so that every child goes through this experience without exception. So we believe that if we're going to fight poverty frontally, that this is the best way to go. Because 10, 15 years from now, you're not going to have any of these children, who would be looking at getting or thinking about criminality as venture, because they are skilled young people. They have the skill set to deal with the employment of tomorrow.
Definitely. I mean, I definitely want to commend the Smart School initiative in the state. But then it's Children's Day today. And we know that we see kids, young children, walking around the streets, helping their parents, hawking and all of that. What is the state government doing to rid the streets of out-of-school children and ensure that they get into these smart schools, especially when you're dealing with a conflict of interest? Most of these parents actually want more children because they need helping hands, they need farm hands. So if you have these smart schools available, but these parents do not want to release their children to go to school because they need to help to sell items, how would the government balance the need to send these children to school? And secondly, what do these smart schools mean for the existing public schools in Enugu State under the purview of the state government?
So
Can I just add a little question to that? I've seen beautiful school infrastructure, mega schools in the north and south of our country. But the critical element that is often missing is the inability to match quality school infrastructure with quality level of instruction. What are you doing about the quality of instruction?
So the smart school is not about the infrastructure. It has very little to do with the infrastructure. So we're not so enthused about the infrastructure. It's something unique. It's beautiful. We made sure everything is there. but we're more interested in the soft items, the soft skills. So how the teachers, how are we able to produce smart teachers that would be able to teach robotics, to be able to teach mechatronics, artificial intelligence. So we recognize that way back. We knew that we needed to churn out commensurate amount of teachers with the skill set to be able to teach this number of kids. And we started dealing with that very earlier on. So we have, even as we talk now, we're building a center for experiential learning and innovation, which is largely where you're expecting these teachers to pass through. But in the last 6 months, we've aggressively been training our teachers. We've been teaching them, those that were getting ready. Don't forget that our time frame to get everybody in the state to get into this system, and that is also speaking to the question you asked, Natalie. It's, you know, how do you get every child? How do you encourage parents? So we've introduced a self-incentive, you know, system where we know that these parents, you know, there is no parents who essentially, and don't forget that we are not just, we're aggressive, because this is not something the parents have been used for. We're even talking about children who would wake up in the morning, won't want to go to school. I can tell you from the pilot scheme we've done now, these kids, when school is over, they don't want to go home. They all want to, the teachers practically will have to tell them it's all over, because they want to stay, and they look forward to coming to school the next day because of the things they come to school to do. It's exciting for them, it's engaging, they keep improving. So we expect that these kids obviously will become the torch bearers. They would challenge their parents. You don't have to litter this on the floor. We're taught to put this in the refuse bin. You know the bathroom is not clean, we need to clean. So we were, you know, that's why we're catching them at that age. And if you look at our manifesto, we refer to it as cutoff points. You know, so everything we're doing is deliberate, not a knee-jerk. It was well thought through, painstakingly thought through, how we're going to achieve this, what the objective for us is, and why we're so obsessed with it. Because we understand again that the standard of our state would be measured or benchmarked based on the quality of human resources we have. And that's what we're looking at 15 years from now.
All right, so what does this mean for the public schools already existing?
So we're absorbing all of them. Oh, this is every child, and that's why I gave you a number of the total children in our public school today, and added more. We're talking about 260,000 in our public schools. We're already planning for 300,000, okay? Because by next year, when every community, every ward would have the smart school, we imagine that there might also be people who want to move from the private school to get into the public school space. So we're already planning for that, so we absorb them.
All right. So quickly, before I bring in Rutus, there are some staggering numbers, and I'm not sure whether that is your focus or there is other objective for you introducing some of these technological interest, education perspective into your ideas. Now, there was a report that says over 400,000 pupils out of school in Enugu State. In fact, the SSG was quoted to have said that there is a percentage, about 50% of pupils in Enugu State cannot read. There is also a concern about the figure of almost 7,000 pupils who drop out of school. And the research and the report says that most of them drop out of school because of financial problems. So these are staggering numbers that indicate that there are some challenges and some problems. But with this initiative, how are you turning those figures back and ensuring that you're reducing the out of school children? What figures are you getting in the last 1 year, and what exactly are your objectives? Is it WAEC result? Is it general output of the individual, or what exactly are you bothered about these figures, or what exactly is your objective?
I think the critical mass we're dealing with here, you won't begin to feel the impact or the indicators shifting the way we radically want it to happen until maybe sometime towards the end of next year, when we would have absorbed all our children into the system. We don't have 400,000 out-of-school children in Enugu State. We indeed do not even have up to 400,000 children of primary school age.
So between 3 and 18 years.
No,
that's what the report says.
Oh, okay. So, well, you have to look at that report again. We knew when we came in, we had about 80-something thousand out-of-school children, and we're already contracting that number. And we also understand the, obvious challenge of the baseline data we did revealed some, of course, part of the things you've mentioned, which we find essentially unacceptable, where you have a child who may have spent 4 years in primary school and still not able to read, or a child who may have spent 5 years in primary school and still having problem with numeracy, basic subtraction and addition and all that. So those are, of course, things, and some the baseline data we had, or the baseline assessment we did, show that we're talking about up to 50% of our children who are in that category. So we're already addressing that with all this. I mean, think about it in terms of spending 158 billion in your education sector, just dedicating 33%. What that simply means is that out of every 100 naira we spend, 33 naira goes to education. Okay, so in terms of per capita, I'm not sure there's any state that gets close, or even in terms of the percentage to the global budget. It's not, but again, this is driven by this conviction that if we're going to, we talked about insecurity earlier on. So if we're going to deal with medium to long-term measures of dealing with insecurity, you have to think education, because ultimately, if you have these kids who you have been able to get at the age of 3, go through this experience, you're giving them reason for hope. Most of what lead our young people into criminality essentially is when they do not have money, they do not have work, but worst still is they do not have skills to get work. So there is absolutely no reason for hope. Yeah. So, but what we're doing with these young ones is to give them reason for hope. Even when they don't have work, they have skills. They know it's only a matter of time.
Right. I think we'll go into economy, but I guess because that's very critical, and Rotus has been itching in that area. So get us started with that.
Actually, I do want to touch on education before it's still interlinked. Everything is still interlinked. I just wonder about the costs, right? But everything we've talked about, from the security to the water, I mean, there's a lot of spending that is that's going on. And I think the IGR numbers, Enugu, for at least the last numbers I looked at for 2022, 25 billion in terms of IGR. That placed Enugu, I think, 14th, right? I think your total revenue makeup, 25% comes from internally generated revenue, about 77% from FAC allocations, right? So how do you plan to maintain this type of spending for education? Is not cheap. You are a well-educated man. You have degrees from Lagos, Enugu, Spain, the UK. How are the electricity that needed for these computers, the internet, the teachers? How that we have to raise taxes? How do you plan to maintain this type of spending for the education and these smart schools?
Yeah. So again, we recognize that, and we realize that it's not an easy spend. It's not a cheap spend. It's not. But again, the question you ask yourself, Rotus, is: would you rather defer that? Would you rather say, okay, I don't have money to spend today on education, but you spend maybe 10 times more than that in dealing with insecurity, and you continue to do that for years to come? Or would you say, okay, let's put an end to this madness, let's begin to get to the root of this? So the way we've been able to manage things, when we talked about disruptive innovation, there were two areas we had in mind to disrupt. One was the revenue model. So the model that had over the years focused largely on revenue from the federation account and very little from the internally or the domestic revenue. We felt it was suboptimal and that we needed to optimize. We needed to disrupt that system where we flip it. Okay, so we do a lot more internally and just do a fraction from and that's essentially what we have done. Today we're looking at, if you look at our budget, that same revenue, internally generated revenue of 25 billion is being projected to grow to 287 billion. So, and we're on target to accomplishing that just by mobilizing the domestic revenue, looking inward and also looking at our dormant assets, converting them into productive assets, clocking all the leakages and to ensure that government revenue is accurately captured and that we also spend it in the interest of the people.
That 200 and something billion, sorry, it's over a period of time, right? If we go from 25 to 200 and something billion.
So over this year, 1 year, this from January, this year.
To go from 25 to 2?
Yeah, so we're looking at actually being the number 4 in the country from that 14th position. So outside Lagos, Rivers and Ogun, we should be the next, because we're quite on target to achieving that, and that's growing across all the sectors.
That is pretty ambitious.
So if you look at the different sectors, we've grown exponentially from the 140 million naira we had in the transport sector, for example. This year we're poised to grow that revenue to over 13 billion. Okay, and the same sort of growth rate is mimicked almost across all the sectors.
When Rotus was talking about, oh, do you intend to raise taxes and so on, how do you pay for this? It brings to mind the issue of taxation. I mean, if you go and read some of the reports, there are people who are always complaining about, oh, we are being taxed heavily and so on. And when you take that and you combine it with the redesign of Enugu City, I was talking a bit earlier to my colleagues about the terminals that are going to come up in Enugu here, in Garki, and then of course in Nsukka. And there's been a lot of buzz about that. Relocation costs for those who are currently there and making way. And there are a lot of complaints as well, Your Excellency, about that. And I'm wondering if you can clear the air about this. Because there are those who said, look, it's government that we've been paying to for where we occupy. Now they say we are illegal occupants, we need to move. There are others who say, well, we're due compensation, we've not been compensated, and so on. Now, what exactly is the situation? And can you link that to the urban development plan? Why that area? Because there are also those who have raised the question that that area is jam-packed. That why didn't the state government pick somewhere which is less congested and would require less people to move?
There is in fact a 50 billion naira lawsuit that has been instituted against your government over this market demolition that Ladi was talking about. So if you can clarify.
So in terms of the tax, whether we have increased the tax rates and all that, we haven't increased the tax rate. What we have essentially done is to widen our tax net. Okay, we've brought in people who were before now into that tax net. We brought them into the tax net. We've tried to deploy technology to optimize our revenue in the different sectors. So we ensure that rather than accept payment in cash, you have e-payment platforms, digital platforms where you can make payment to government, and those revenues are captured accurately. And so the leakages that were inherent in the manual system, we eliminated. So in terms of the transport infrastructural project that we're doing, you and I, Ladi, know very well that across the world, if you look at the city livability index, without a functional transport system, a seamless transport system, the city livability index drops to the barest minimum, okay? And the truth is that we talked about connecting the dots. The Enugu that we're basically inhabiting here today was designed in the 50s, okay, when we had barely 62,000 people who live here in the city. Today, Enugu has grown to close to 4 million people living in. So it's grown from that colonial outpost in 1907, you know, to a megapolis. You know, it's a big city, and so you cannot talk about, even with the way we are today, the current level of our GDP, we're already choking, okay? We are overcrowded. So imagine growing, except you're paying a lip service to that growth level. Imagine adding another 100% growth, not to talk of sevenfold, okay? Can you possibly, it's almost like having a foundation where you had 2 floors on that foundation, and you decide to add additional 7 floors, and you're saying, oh, I'm going to still retain that foundation. You already know what the consequences would be. It would collapse completely. So, and that's essentially what we're trying to do here. It's connecting those dots, which is why we've talked about expanding the city. But the current city where we live today is totally it's just not going to be acceptable to live the way we currently live. So if you look at where we're trying to do the transportation terminals, both the inter and the intra-city terminals, you see that that's actually the natural park where the park ought to be. But what has happened over the years that people had built up that place and now driven the parks to the road. Okay, so we're just going back to the master plan of the city, making sure that we get back that land. And this is not being something we did without empathy. We've been engaging these businesses since October. I've had to meet with them more than 4 times. I've had to discuss with them, and also we've even provided an alternative location for them and said to them, look, you're going to have the first right of refusal once this place, because we're just going to enhance the functionality of this place, make sure that the road is free, people can drive through, and you have a functional transport terminal where you can all come back and play. So say, give us 9 months and you can come back, have your transport terminals here and all that.
One area that Ladi mentioned, which I think was very important in terms of messaging, taxation is very key, and I'm not sure how much of that feedback you're getting from the people. Civil servant might be very used to deduction from the source and some of the level of levies and taxes, but SMEs in Enugu State seem to be finding it difficult to adjusting to some of the new policies, which some of them are imagining that is not coming with some human face. Are you able to message it properly and communicate your ideas such that they don't feel that you are burdening them too much? Are you burdening them actually with too much of taxation, Governor?
No, we're not. Frankly, what we have, again, it's almost like we said, look, if you've been playing in the informal sector and you've not been paying anything to government, and suddenly government recognizes that, look, there is value here and we need to bring these people into that net, you know, of taxation, and you, instead of And I think that's how you grow the economy. That's how you generate revenue and be able to provide services for the people. You just talked about the smart school initiatives. We are doing no less remarkable things in the public health care space. And so we are cognizant of our responsibility in the areas of social services and infrastructure. So it's almost like a contract, okay? We are keeping to our own part of the bargain, and we're urging, of course, our citizens who have assigned us to do this job to also keep to their own part of the bargain. And as I said, it's a collective work. And if we haven't communicated properly, I can assure you we're going to continue to communicate so that ultimately they see the value that this is how we can serve them well.
How about the area of compensation? Because there are those who have accepted that we are not here legally. We ought to move.
Yes.
And they've given us another, but they say that they have not been captured in the compensation plan and that they don't like that fact. Or some have actually said, well, the compensation I've been given is not commensurate with my investment in this area. So perhaps could you clear there about how this is arrived at and how people get compensated?
Yeah, so we've worked closely with the railway because the property in question is also largely railway's properties, most part of it. And we have had a joint valuation done by both our team and the railway team. So we've now, of course, before any compensation is paid, those figures are agreed on, not by what I feel or what railway, but an objective valuation being done by experts. So it's on the basis of that, okay, that we've been paying this compensation, and we'll continue. It's an ongoing thing. We continue. So if there are people who may not have received that, they would get their compensation. And
what about those who have gone to court? There's a 50 billion lawsuit over the market demolition.
So you know that when again these acquisitions are done, they are done for overriding public interest. They are not in the. It's not for my personal interest, and we have a constitutional responsibility to ensure the welfare of everybody, not just a particular person. Okay, and of course, if people, the court is an avenue to ventilate, whatever whatever dislike, in case you dislike the government policy or whatever we're doing, and essentially we would ensure that justice is done to everybody.
Babajide.
You talked earlier about your desire to revive dormant assets as a means of stimulating production, which
yes.
you said will lead to growth. I want you to throw some light on the oil palm company that you decided to bring in investors to help you.
Yeah. So
how much value?
While you're doing that,
how much value do you see there?
While you're doing that, perhaps you should also talk about Hotel Presidential.
Yeah.
And a couple of the other
yes.
industries.
Yes. Yes. So again, we see these promises we made to our people as sacred. When we were out there campaigning, we were very clear about the things we want to achieve across all the sector, and we also gave timelines. So in the area of our dormant assets, this is consistent with our social contract, what we have committed to doing, making sure that we convert those dormant. Some of these assets have laid fallow in several decades. And for the palm plantation, it was for us inexcusable. So, and what I have been doing since I assumed office was going around the world and across the country, pitching that Enugu State is ready for business and making sure that the investors know that we're not only going to provide the enabling environment, but we would help de-risk some of the factors that may inhibit investment. So if we identify the TAs or technical assistance as a major factor, we'll provide that, we'll help provide that. If we you have challenges with the commerciality, we would come listen to you and work with you and see how. So because the objective for us is to make sure that the investments continue to flow into Enugu. So we're very excited about the recent PPP we had with the Pragmatic Palm, where we have just signed a 100 billion naira deal, and again the state providing its own equity by the plantation and the land assets we have, having 40% of that deal. So we feel that it's a good thing for the people of Enugu State. The idea is that in a span of 5 years, that whole plantation will be fully operationalized and the production will become optimal.
How about the other assets?
And we're also doing that across different other assets. We're doing that with the Hotel Presidential, where we're now reviving that assets. We, again, talking about de-risking investment flow. So as a government, if you look at a space and you think that there is a suppressed demand and you want to create that demand, it's your job to be able to enable that. To de-risk construction, for example, if you realize that, oh, if I can get this into an operational state, I will find investors. And we've done that in a couple of assets. We're doing that with Niger Gas, with Hotel Presidential, the conference center. Just recently, we also laid the stone for construction of a 5-star hotel. Again, all this will be connecting the dots. We're working with the federal government to operationalize the international wing of the airport. And we're also going to do a cargo terminal, making sure that all this link. Because if you talk about attracting 3 million people in your tourism sector every year here, except again, it's just a mere posturing. If you really think about it, you're talking about operating about 100 flights daily here from maybe 7 flights that we're doing today. So what are those things you need to put in place? So you have to think ahead. You have to start thinking, do you have those key enablers? So we're doing a conference center of 5,000 capacity. Do we have the keys? How many keys do we have in Enugu? That's the first question. Any person trying to come to Enugu to have a conference will ask, oh, good, you have a conference center. But what about the keys? You must, at the minimum, be able to show you have up to 10,000 keys, okay, for it to be attractive, okay, so you have to.
All right. Natalie.
All right, just 2 questions very quickly. The first one is, with regard to the taxation in Enugu State, we do understand that you need to raise the state's economy from $4.4 billion to $30 billion. So people have to pay their taxes. But in the area of incentivizing these businesses to ensure that they do not feel crippled by these taxes, which they are already struggling to pay because things are bad in the nation generally. Since removal of subsidy, things have been so difficult for businesses. What is this government doing in the area of incentives for these businesses to help them stay afloat? Because when purchasing power reduces, you can imagine that they have less patronage. Then also in the area of these businesses that are being revived, what has informed the use of special purpose vehicles to ensure the revival of some of these moribund assets in the states?
So there is every incentive that we're giving to businesses and investors to come into Enugu. Don't also forget that my background is business and entrepreneurship. So, and one of the major challenges I had dealt with as a CEO was dealing with externalities, dealing with external factors, spending 50–60% of my executive time just dealing with external factors. So I've always known that given the opportunity to serve in the public space, I would make life easy for businesses. I wouldn't want them to spend 40 or 50% of their time on it. So we're making sure that the ease of doing business is achieved here. So if you look at the quality of services these businesses get in the area of whether is, I'm sure you know recently we have just established the Enugu Geographic Information System, which means that it's going to be very easy for you to apply and obtain your CFO, within a very short space of time. Our target is 72 hours from when you apply and when you obtain your CFO. in the area of, obtaining your construction permits and all that, we're doing quite a lot. Skills and labor, sub-indicator of the ease of doing business. We're also enhancing the capacity of our people to be able to service the businesses that are here. So we haven't, we haven't increased, and let me correct that perception. We haven't increased tax rates. Okay, what essentially we've done is to expand the tax net to bring in people, maybe those playing in the informal sector who were not captured before, who were paying nothing to government, bringing them in and using electronic platform to ensure that the revenue is not leaking. So that's essentially what we...
Your Excellency, sorry,
just remember, Ladi, on what she said, there are those who believe that sometimes even some of the agents who are collecting these taxes, we shut down some markets, some stores, forcibly to get these taxes out. And some of these nuances gives a sense of maybe there's no human face in the collection. Can you clarify, say something about that?
No, so we have a system, and we also have a way of picking you out. Okay, just like the different leakages we had before now in people not renewing their licenses and not renewing their insurance and all that. Very soon, nobody would need to halt you on the road like it's currently happening because of the technology we're about to deploy. We should be able to identify your vehicle and send you a ticket the next day. Okay, with the...
That is done in the UK.
Yes, so all our surveillance cameras are AI embedded.
So you have all CCTVs in most parts
absolutely.
of the city alone or outside
so
the city?
we have in the city, and we have in 5 local governments where we identified as flashpoints. Okay, those 5 local governments are equally covered. Okay, so we are able to deploy technology to do these things with ease. Again, understand that this is not, if you have been used to not paying anything and suddenly you are caught in that net and you're being told to even pay a little. Of course, talk about their experience. Are they, seeing the impact of government in their locality in terms of road construction, provision of water, making sure that you have the street lights on and all that. So there are a lot we have to do. And
you mentioned it in this last answer now, road construction.
Yeah.
It's the most obvious thing that most state governments do, when the governors get into office, roads.
Yeah.
You didn't start that way. So there was an outcry over you're not doing anything about roads at the very start of your term. But then when you unveiled the project, it was 81 or so roads at the same time. And then it went from you are not doing anything to you are trying to do too much at the same time. And there were complaints about dust and the closure of roads and the impending traffic and all of that. How is that going? How many of those roads are now completed? I mean, we're talking about several months down the line now. How many of those roads are completed? What has been the experience like in terms of feedback? Because I see that my colleagues are very interested in feedback from the people about what has happened to their areas. Because again, that links back to Sean's question and Natalie's question about taxes and the willingness, the incentivization to pay.
Yes, so again, we've when we came in, we recognized the fact that you have to essentially, for this road design, for it to be sustainable, you need to have a proper or a detailed engineering design, and that requires some lead time. It requires you to do a proper procurement process, ensure that you have the right contractors, you've profiled them, and you don't want to have cost overrun or time overrun, so you want to be sure to profile your contractors well, and which is why it took a bit of time. But of course, when we started, we had to do 71 urban roads and 10 rural roads, and the 71 urban roads were done. I think we may have 1 or 2 left, but that is sure to be done within the next few days. In terms of the rural roads, they are quite a stretch. Some of them stretch as long as we have some that has a length of about 42 kilometers, several with a length of 42 kilometers with a number of bridges to go. So that's ongoing aggressively. In fact, we got the contractors, because we know that they may not be able to work in severe weather. We got them to work day and night to make sure that they complete this project as soon as possible, because a number of them are actually designed to open up the city, create gateways, to come into Enugu. For example, the one we're doing from Amankano to Ikem would enable you to drive to Abuja, without having to get into the city. It's just a shortcut to Obolo, then Makurdi. And so we're doing that roads now. They're all ongoing.
All right, we're in the home stretch now, so we need to quickly wrap up. And I know we have
it's 9 minutes to go. It's just amazing how much the time has flown. But very, very quickly, it shows how hard governance is, because there's so many touch points. Your Excellency, quickly on the economy, on coal. Coal city, right? This is one of your natural resources. Enugu is blessed with so much. I want to link that with electricity. China, I understand in 2023, was able to generate about 50 gigawatts of electricity just from coal plant. So I want to find out from you what your plans are for your natural resources, how coal ties into the electricity surveillance that has been given over to Enugu now, where you're supplying, reviewing your own electricity, but also the renewable energy portion of that.
Yes.
You've held a lot of forums, you've talked to a lot of foreign investors. This whole renewable energy, clean energy drive, is that a hindrance since coal is seen as a dirty fuel? So how are you? And
so a lot of people tend to look at Enugu and think about coal, which is good. I mean, coal was discovered. Coal was it's a sobriquet. Coal was discovered here in the early 90s, 1907. And of course, at some point was the major economic stay for the country. But beyond coal, Enugu is also sitting on gas. We have over 5 trillion cubic feet of gas deposit here in Enugu. And our objective in the electricity sector is to ensure sustainable and reliable power supply to our people, even if it means just ring fencing Enugu. So we've done an audit, a power audit of Enugu in terms of public utilities, the residents, the businesses, the industries. So we know what we need now, what we would need in years to come, given the growth projection we have. So we're already planning to deal with that, to harness the resources we have here. And we also believe in just transition. We are, of course, mindful of the climate management. So we actually have a robust policy on climate management, which we have developed, and which is why even in our schools, the smart schools we're talking about, they all have solar panel. They generate their energy from solar. The same thing is happening in the primary healthcare centers. We're doing 260 type 2 primary healthcare centers across our wards as well, and they're all going to be powered by solar as well. So for captive areas, we provide those captive renewable sources of energy, and that's what we're doing.
We're totally out of time, but there is an urgency and importance for you to clarify the United Palm Products contract, the award of 100 billion naira with Pragmatic Palms Limited. Is it investing or funding? Can you clarify what is the percentage of Pragmatic Palms?
So the Pragmatic Palms, the structure it's a 60-40% structure. So Enugu State Government has 40% shares in terms of equity and also earnings, right? Pragmatic has 60%. And Pragmatic is going to, through debt and equity instrument, fund the 60%. They have the responsibility. So if you're spending 600 billion and Enugu is taking to have already provided 40% of that through its own assets, it means the balance, whether it's equity or debt, would be funded by Pragmatic.
All right, we're totally out of time, but I'd like you to do to perform a quick duty, which is going to be in 30 seconds. It's not going to be a very difficult one, but I'd like you to look into the camera, Governor. There are a lot of people who have given you a lot of names. Those who didn't even give you a chance in the campaigns prior to the election. You have won. You are the governor now. And those who have tagged you an elitist governor, those who have thought that your policies are these, your policies are that, you've had about 2 hours to explain some of these. But the question will be, can you look into the camera and tell the people of Enugu State that truly and genuinely you have their interest? And what would be the legacy that you want to leave as a governor of Enugu State? Is 1 year? Yes. Or do you have your eyes on the ball, and what legacy are you hoping to leave? If you can do that in 30 seconds, I'll be glad.
So we firstly want to express our profound gratitude to the people of Enugu State for giving us the opportunity to serve them. Just like I did few minutes after my swearing in, I went straight to work and to make some consequential decision. That urgency, it's not any less today. We are still in a hurry to accomplish a lot of the items in the social contracts we've executed with the people of Enugu State. So we want to enjoin them to continue to have faith in this journey that we've already embarked with them. As I said, democracy is a collective work, and together we'll be able to get to that promised land that we have promised them. And that is a land where you have Enugu's economy getting over 30 billion, poverty being a thing of the past in our city, again to ask them to join us and continue to be part of us in this journey. We cannot thank them enough, and as we want to say in Enugu, tomorrow is here. Thank you.
Dr. Peter Mbah, thank you so much. You're Executive Governor of Enugu State. Thank you so much indeed for your time, and you have indeed been able to attract some of the biggest wigs in the media sector right here in Enugu State, the coal city state. Ladi Akere Doluali is a son of the soil in that sense of Enugu television. Natalie Oku, thank you so much indeed, of Afia Television. And the big man, Babajide Kolade Otitoju of the television continent, and my very good friend, Rotus Oduri of Arise Television. And my name is Shonwa Kimale, and that's been it on this media chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I know that you've gotten so much more information about the governor, the governance in Enugu State, but you have your questions and perhaps some answers now. Until next time, bye, everyone.
Welcome back from the live telecast. We'll now continue with our regular programs. Stay tuned.
With many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.